and it was signed by Mr. Shezi, who you will recall was mentioned in the evidence of Dr. Machila, Mr. Sizwe Theophilus Shezi, with the request that I present this letter to the Commission, and by doing so, then it will not be necessary for him to apply to come and give testimony. So I'm going to read this letter into the record, Mr. Commissioner. I've given copies to Dr. Machila and Council, and it reads as follows. Dear Sir, submission in response to the testimony of Dr. Daniel Machila. I'm writing to the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of impropriety regarding the Public Investment Corporation in response to the testimony given and submissions made to the Commission by Dr. Daniel Machila on or about the 15th of July 2019 regarding the investment in Total South Africa, TSA, by Kilimanjaro Sakamoto Consortium Pty Limited, Kisaku, and funded by the Public Investment Corporation, referred to as the Tesaku transaction. I watched in shock as Dr. Machila related his concerns regarding my involvement in Kilimanjaro Capital Pty Limited, Kilicap, and by virtue of the imposed merger, Kisaku as a shareholder. My shock and surprise stems from the fact that at the very onset of the Tesaku transaction, I personally met with Dr. Machila to introduce Mr. Lawrence Malautsi and the Tesaku transaction to the PIC. The meeting took place at the PIC head office in Garsfontein on the 21st of May 2015. Dr. Machila therefore knew of my involvement and interest even before the Tesaku transaction started being processed by the PIC. It is my understanding that among many steps in the PIC process, the PIC insists on submissions regarding ultimate beneficial shareholding in any investee company, and my shareholding, although indirect, was fully disclosed. None of the PIC transaction team members, nor Dr. Machila himself, raised any concerns regarding my shareholding in Kilicap or indirectly in Kisaku at any point before the Tesaku transaction reached financial close. It is indeed true that I personally felt very aggrieved regarding the imposition of a merger with another company, and I conveyed this to Dr. Machila himself. Dr. Machila's testimony that I am angry because he would not issue a binding letter of support is not true. Kilicap was confident in the value proposition presented to the PIC and the feedback regarding the funding application process. I trust it is clear to the Commission that the PIC had no concerns regarding the financial and commercial merit of the Tesaku transaction. It is a blatant lie that I approached the then Minister of Finance, Dr. Nhlanhla Nene, and Deputy Minister, Mr. Nkabesi Jonas, to have Dr. Machila fired. It is my understanding that matters relating to the employment of the Chief Executive Officer of the PIC would fall under the purvey of the Board of Directors of the PIC. I would urge the Commission to seek comment from Mr. Nene and Mr. Jonas regarding the spurious allegations made by Dr. Machila. I am certain that they will deny the same, as no such exchanges between myself and Mr. Nene or Mr. Jonas ever took place. Dr. Machila has unfairly and dishonestly created the impression that I'm a politically exposed person, when the same has no basis. I'm willing to present myself to the Commission and place the facts on record regarding my involvement in the Tesaku transaction and or provide any assistance to the Commission that it deems necessary, and is signed by Mr. Shezi. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Ruloff, sir, is there anything that you'd like to say in regard to this letter?
Dr. Malachi does have some comments. Sorry, I apologize.
I wondered who that was.
Does have some comments, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you. Dr. Machila, I think let's take the oath afresh. Some entertainment going on. Dr. Machila, you don't have any objection. You have taken the oath before.
I have.
Do you
Commissioner.
then swear that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Your right hand and say, so help me God?
Mudimu Ntuse.
Thank you very much. Yes, what would you like to say about the contents of this letter?
Thanks, Commissioner. It's true that I've met Mr. Shezi before. In fact, it's probably on a number of occasions, including the transaction that we're going to discuss later in Aran Energy. He's the one who introduced the promoter. But the fact that he was has indirect interest in this was never disclosed to us. I don't know how we get to know about this indirect interest. You know, all we could assess is direct interest based on information that is provided to us, you know, which information didn't include his name. And he is well known, Mr. Shezi, to have run the former president Zuma's foundations in the past and very much linked to that office, you know, and therefore that makes him a politically exposed person in terms of the definition.
And then the final one is about you saying that he asked the minister to fire you.
That I heard from the deputy minister, who was the chairman of the PIC at that time, Mr. SABC Jonas. I think that's what we said in the statement as well.
Okay.
Dr. Machila, what is your comment on Mr. Shezi's allegation that the fact that he introduced Mr. Mulawitsi was sufficient for you to have known, or that you should have known, of his involvement and interest in the Tosako transaction?
I think, Commissioner, it's very common for people to introduce other potential client of the PIC to the PIC, and they will disappear from the scene, and we wouldn't know any sort of arrangement that they have, you know, from this introduction. So it's very common that people do introduce a potential customers, if I can put that word, of the PIC.
Yes, but do you agree that he introduced Mr. Mulawitsi?
I
remember
agree.
that?
I agree that he did introduce Mr. Mulawitsi.
Yes, thank you. Any further comment?
We don't have any further comment, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you. We shall then proceed with the evidence.
Mr. Commissioner, we are at page 184, paragraph 539, dealing with the issue of Daybreak Farms. Page 184, paragraph 539.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Commissioner. 539. Mr. Roy Raja, in his statement to this commission, has given a detailed presentation on how the investment in Daybreak was made. The investment was made to drive transformation in the agricultural sector, stimulate economic activity in the areas around its operations by supporting small farmers to provide maize, soybeans, and the provision, to provide jobs required to make the farms to run efficiently and profitably. Under the leadership of Mr. Maponya, who had very little respect for governance, the farm took a bit strain to a point of near collapse. We had to intervene to save this PIC investments, to save the PIC investment. We removed Mr. Maponya and replaced him with Mr. Tines de Jong, an employee of the PIC, whilst we were looking for a suitable individual. Mr. de Jong managed to stabilize the operations. I think Mr. de Jong did testify to this commission. I requested Mr. de Jong to conduct a forensic investigation into the affairs of Daybreak Farms. The report uncovered acts of maladministration and lack of respect for governance on the part of Mr. Maponya. The PIC embarked on an exercise of replacing Mr. Maponya as CEO and also to perfect its security in the funding instruments to MMI, which had now breached covenants. The result of this exercise was to take over the affairs of the company by the PIC to protect its investment. Mr. Maponya was replaced by Mr. Seruwe, the former commissioner of the UIF, who had just finished his term at the UIF. Mr. Seruwe will lead the company back to profitability. Daybreak Farms is now profitable and making significant contribution to the transformation of the poultry industry.
No further questions, Mr. Commissioner.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Dr. Machilla, if my recollection is correct, with the problems with AfriSam, trying to correct that, one of the conditions was that they must sell off Daybreak because it was non-profitable. Can you recall that?
It's Afgri.
Afgri.
Yes.
Afgri.
Yes. Yes.
Is that correct?
I recall that.
And in less than a year after that, the PIC invested in Daybreak.
That's correct.
And I put it to you, it was basically a bankrupt business at the time, Daybreak.
Yeah, it looks pretty bad. But I mean, technically, it looked like it's bankrupt, but we believe that there was a lot of value in it and the potential to turn it around to drive job creation and transformation in that area.
And coupled with that, we had the situation of Mr. Maponya, who I believe is also the same guy of the person involved in SA Homelands.
That's correct. That is the Mr. Maponya.
He is a person, you state here under oath, is a man who had very little respect for good corporate governance.
That's correct.
Now, the technical insolvency of this entity and coupled with what seems to me poor leadership, was that picked up in the due diligence?
Commissioner, not at that stage. Not at that stage. I think Mr. Raja gave a fair amount of explanation around the technical details of this so-called technical insolvency.
And according to information, I think it's also been, Mr. de Jong testified about that, shortly after this investment by the PIC into Daybreak Farms, Mr. Maponya fired almost the whole executive top structure of the company.
I understand so. There were key people that were fired and replaced by people that he appointed.
And that also resulted in the worsening of the financial position of Daybreak Farms.
That's correct. Yeah.
Now, luckily for the PIC, this is one of the good stories before the Commission. Because of interventions by the PIC, you were able to turn around this company. Is that correct?
That's correct. We were able to turn around the company through our intervention.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, I've got a couple of questions here. The first one is on the first paragraph you've got, 539. last sentence. You mentioned supporting small black farmers and to provide jobs and all that. Did it happen? Did that program happen?
Commissioner, we have a report that we can share with the Commission on the successes around these issues that are mentioned here. You know, profitability, it has been mentioned, but in terms of job creation and supporting small-scale farmers, we can give the Commission that report.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
that has been achieved.
yes, so jobs have been created and black farmers have been supported?
Absolutely.
Roughly.
And most importantly, when we started there were lots of casual workers. In fact, they came in through brokers, and once the company became profitable, they were all absorbed into the company as permanent employees. Almost half of the workforce there.
Just tell me first about AFGRI. I mean, when did the PIC put in the money there, and what has happened to AFGRI, and where is it now?
Sure.
Yeah, just
yeah.
briefly. Yeah,
I think
to
first,
understand.
yeah, we put in money, I can't remember the dates, it should have been close to 2014 or somewhere around there. I think my colleagues came to present here.
2013 it looks like, yeah. around
somewhere
there.
around there.
Yes.
And it has done very well. We also did a further joint investment into a bank. I think it was Bank of Athens. They've bought Bank of Athens to use it as a vehicle to support financing in agriculture. So AFGRI has done very well, you know. So as the evidence leader was saying, Commissioner, AFGRI wanted to exit Daybreak. And they were exiting it because they were not running it properly. And so PIC saw an opportunity to get into it and turn it around. I mean, we can accept that. Unfortunately, the person who was supposed to run with this was not the best, but at least we managed to turn it around. And yeah. So AFGRI has done very well so far. We're
Generally
happy.
well.
Yeah,
And
we're happy with it.
sort of who was the BE partner there in the AFGRI investment?
We had supported by FEPI, which is the company led by Mr. Maponya.
Yes. And where is his stake now? What has happened to the BE group in AFGRI?
Yeah, my understanding is that through several, I think it's one or twice, where a financial contribution was needed to buy into a Bank of Athens, and I can't remember another transaction. So PIC didn't support their portion. PIC did direct investment. So they've been diluted slightly, in other words.
To around what, 12%?
I don't have the figure
Yeah,
at this
because
stage.
it looks like they had about 20% and they were diluted to around 12%. Is that correct?
They would have been diluted
Somewhere
to
there,
that
somewhere around
point,
there.
yeah. But my understanding is that they've been given an option. You know, they've been given an option to raise funding to buy PIC's portion.
Oh.
So it's there if they can get
And,
other funding.
Yeah, to buy out sort of the stake that PIC holds in AFGRI,
Absolutely.
the total stake.
Yeah, that's my understanding, that they do have an option if they can raise funding from elsewhere.
Yeah. And then just in terms of the valuation of 1.2 billion rand, I would take it that the money went to AFGRI, the check, you know, the 1.2 billion rand check of selling Daybreak. Then it goes to AFGRI. What happened to that money? Did the PIC get a special dividend and the other partners and all that? Can you recall?
I can't recall what happened to the money. I think it's something that can be checked with the company. Yes. But my sense is that they've been kept in the company to settle other liabilities and for growth as well, to expand the business. Yeah. I don't remember a special dividend following the the transaction.
Yes, because this could clear some debt that the PIC has given to the BE consortium and the PIC itself, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
So-
But I
so-
think it must have been kept in the
in
company
the
for
business.
growth and balance sheet restructuring.
Yeah. So
But
you
I
can't recall whether there was a dividend or not?
No, I can't recall a dividend.
Okay,
Commissioner.
all right. And then, in terms of the corporate governance, you say sort of it was poor, Mr. Dememai person, Kimaponya. Tell me, I mean, from his CV, we thought he had the experience in farming and all that. I mean, if you look at his CV, the person has had experience in farming and all that. So, what went wrong there? Why couldn't he run Daybreak?
I think it boils down to general governance, you know, the process of making investments, and I mean, the process of running a company, and understanding the role of the CEO versus the board, you know, what the CEO is hired to do, what is within their delegated authority, you know. I think he was running it as if he's the board and everything, you know, forgetting that there is a board who's supposed to make rules, and then he execute on that basis. So, unfortunately, he set up many other things, made very significant changes without the approval of the board, which were unfortunately not contributing to the growth of the company, you know. So that's why we had to step in and intervene to stop the potential loss of our investments at the time.
Yes, all right. And then the final question is on Daybreak and the future, because when one looks at the numbers, you are saying it's doing well, but if you look at returns into the future, they are projected not to meet the benchmarks. You know, they're looking at about 6% per annum, you know, in terms of returns. The IRRs.
Well, the IRRs, I guess, will be the impact of the huge losses that were made in the beginning, that have taken out quite a bit, you know. So to make up for that, you need, you know, more time, unfortunately, you know, and so it's a typical turnaround situation where you will have to wait longer to get to the returns that you want, you know. Yeah. But
Yes.
I saw an article saying chickens are going to be very expensive soon, so we may recover money very quickly.
Yeah. With chickens, you can never know. We've
As
seen
long
it.
as long as there's no bird flu and all those
Yeah.
kind of things. But I think that facility has withstood those kind of shocks
Yeah.
in a spectacular way.
Yeah, with chickens you can't know, because you know on the JSE the chicken stocks haven't done well generally, but yeah. And then the final thing is just in terms of lessons on this transaction, what are the key ones? I mean, where do you think the PIC went wrong? You know, what are the key
I think
lessons there?
when I before I left the PIC, we were busy working out, you know, a new way of closing transactions. You know, there has to be a pre-disbursement process in the unlisted space where we ensure that the governance structures that are supposed to be in place are in place, you know, fully before a disbursement can happen, you know. And that
like the Mozambique
the similar
case.
kind of yeah. Those are some of the learnings. And so we were putting together a solution to say, you know, what are the things that needs to be done when a transaction is been approved and disbursement is about to take place? You know, what should be in place? You know, from governance that deals with the finances of the company, systems, people, all of those kind of things that are required, you know, to ensure that the company is ready. If it's new, but it must be ready to run, so that when the money flows, it flows into a board that is able to control the affairs of the company properly. And we were putting together at that time a unit, and we were still thinking about whether it should be part of the expansion of the work of audit. And I'm not saying internal audit, but audit in general. The PIC might have to think of a unit at that point that deals with audit, and it can be both internal and the audit that's done on companies that we are invested in, especially the small ones that don't necessarily have, you know, the right audit firms, if I can use that word, with respect, you know, that some credible companies that can provide that audit work to give comfort that the company is in good shape, it's running it booked properly, there's governance, and so on and so forth. That's something that we were about to put together as part of the PMV, portfolio management and valuation. But those deal with audit issues so that we get a handle on the finances of our investee companies.
So this would be like governance structures, you know, what finances, you know, like in terms of what financial statements being issued and all that? Is that
Absolutely.
what you're saying? And the systems, is that what normal
The normal
procedures, policies?
Procedures, and also taking advantage of technology to see how we can link to each and every investee company, that at least we are on top of the records, we can see them almost live.
Yeah.
You know, any invoice, whatever, movement in cash, by the end of the day or end of the week, we know what's happening at the company, and the end of the month, the quarter, we get quality information coupled with the PIC team going there to check that things are done properly. Yeah. I think it's an important one, Commissioner. It's an important question, especially if we have an appreciation that unlisted investments are probably the area that may help the economy to grow, if we identify, but it requires the right kind of management and systems. So this kind of a structure, if it's implemented, it may go a long way in ensuring that the unlisted investment portfolio is as robust and properly managed as possible. Yeah.
Just to finalize then, what do you think, what are the 2 or 3 things that went wrong at the beginning of that transaction then? How would you summarize them?
I would summarize it as more at the implementation stage. In other implementation, I'm talking about money flowing and so on, and not finding the right governance structure to accept it and do what is necessary to take the company forward.
Yes,
For me, that is the big one. The issue of valuation, that it was overvalued and this and that, we know we do have, you know, views around what the valuation should be. The seller also has a view about what his valuation is, and then after, you know, a couple of fights, you punch each other to a point where you agree that maybe that's the value that can be accepted by both parties, and you transact on that basis. Yeah. The onus is on the buyer to say, how do I extract, you know, returns out of it, because you don't overpay without a plan to generate the returns. Yeah. You know, there has to be something appealing that says to you, I can pay a little bit of premium because if I do X, Y, and Z, I should be able to recover that and make money, you know, the first possible way, you know. So for me, the biggest challenge, and it cuts across most of the investment that went wrong in the PIC, it's governance, you know, on conclusion of the transaction that's supposed to do certain things when the money has flowed into the company, or we've paid for the asset. Yeah.
So you are saying the main thing was the governance and the management,
yes,
basically, and monitoring.
From there,
what about the monitoring?
And again, I mean, it's governance can be across. You know, it's from having the right board, the right board that's going to make sure that there are there's management that's supposed to run the affairs of the company, which will then make sure that there are policies, procedures, and many other, you know, processes that, of course, can drive the company to function. You know, okay. That's very key. And then you rightly say the monitoring from our side, that it becomes a lot more robust. you know. One of the things that I would probably recommend to the committee as well in terms of PIC structure is beefing up of the portfolio monitoring and evaluation team. It has to be strengthened. And it does not have to be a very big team internally, because there are lots of other service providers, you know, small and medium size, that should be able to perform some of the functions on behalf of the PIC. And we had tested that before I left, by the way, with one or two companies that were in distress. We appointed, you know, small black firms to conduct some work for us, and they did a great job, and we thought we could expand that activity to cover the bigger portfolio.
Yes. All right. And then the final question is on 542, which is quite an interesting thing, but maybe you can add some color to that the UIF seems it was an investor in Daybreak, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah.
And then the person from there was taken to run the company. How do you, it might not look good. It could be correct, but it might not look that good.
I think, Chair, I mean, we value the experience of the former UIF commissioner, because he was leaving the commission.
Yes.
And he knew the investment and the challenge that we were faced with quite well. And this was supposed to be an interim measure to say, you know, let's replace this person with Mr. Sruwe, you know, so that he can help us restructure the company, you know. But he did a fantastic, he was just supposed to stabilize the company and get it to a point where we can now put together the right governance, look for the right CEO, and do all the intervention that is necessary. But he had done such a great job that there were changes, and he was recommended to become even the CEO at some point by the board. Yeah.
And it went through normal sort of approval processes.
Yes.
Any conflicts or whatever?
Yeah. No, we didn't pick up any conflicts.
Any conflicts?
Yeah, we recommended him to our board.
Yeah.
It's a director first.
Okay. And it was approved by the board and
Exactly,
all that?
yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. I think I'm done.
Dr. Machila, it's quite encouraging to hear that the company succeeded, you know, with its aim of job creation, etc., with Daybreak. But at the time that you left the company, did you have any idea of how big Daybreak was in terms of employee numbers?
Commissioner, we can get the numbers. Really, what I remember, there was almost 3,000 or so that were there through labor brokers. Almost 3,000, but I'm sure the company can give us the right numbers. Who the company then absorbed into a permanent position, removed the middleman, you know. So that was a big achievement at the time, you know. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the workforce, I think we can get the numbers, but it's north of 3,000, I think, that are working there, just in the facility. And of course, there will be others that benefit from the value chain or activity, business activity of Daybreak Farms.
Just to double check, so small farmers sort of providing maize and soya beans to Daybreak. I mean, how does it actually work? I mean, do you go to the farmers and then assist them? How does it work that, you know, you sort of leave the large farmers and go to small farmers? Do they deliver the goods and all that? How does it actually work? Is it a good, seamless process, or you need to support them and
Commissioner, I think the company.
Can you remember? I mean, do you know?
I think the company will be in a much better position to assist with that. The big farmers are still part of it to bring that, you know, security of supply, you know. But then you give the small farmers a chance as well to to farm and support them with the necessary tools, equipment, technical advice to be able to do that. And this kind of things work even better if the big farmer is roped in to assist the small farmer with the technical advice and many other things. And then you find that it works even better if you do that, you know. But I would really, ask the commission to get the report from the company directly, you know. Yeah.
Good stuff. Mr. Rulof, say anything else?
Nothing else, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner, with your leave, and I haven't discussed it with my learned friend before, but it's not a trick question or a trap I'm trying to set. But while we have Dr. Machila here, I just want to ask him a couple of questions on the Karan Beef transaction, which is also part of the investigations by the forensic team and that came out in the James Noku emails, that people benefited from that transaction. Dr. Machila, you are...
No, let me ask Mr. Rulof, sir, is there any problem with that, Mr. Rulof, sir, at this stage?
I don't think that there's any problem. But Dr. Machila will answer as best he can, and if he can't answer, then he can't answer, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Dr. Machila, I'm sorry I'm bringing this up now, but it's going to assist our investigating team as well. You've been involved in the Karan Beef transaction. Now, I can just place on record that we have almost completed that investigation, and we couldn't find anything wrong from the PIC side with that proposed investment. It's not done yet, it's not signed and sealed, but what has emerged from this investigation is that the GEPF might have lost their appetite for this transaction based on the fact that where it is a family business like Karan Beef, it is a risk if you refer to the big farmer, the big white farmer, if you can call him that. Mr. Ivan Karan is the big white farmer. In terms of this transaction, he will still be involved after the transaction for a period of 2 to 3 years. The concern of the GEPF is that once, and because it's a family business, the previous owner leaves, this business might collapse. Can you comment on that?
Commissioner, first, this came about through this James Nogu allegation again. And James Nogu has brought us here. And each time, we hear that James Nogu's allegations cannot be tested, from senior counsel advocate Backlander, where James Nogu said, I had a romantic relationship with Miss Lowe, and it was proven that that is not the case. And he's been consistent, this James Nogu, because even in the Karan, I'm glad to hear that nothing was found, so. But James Nogu has cost us quite a lot, some of us, in a big way, I'm here today, we are here today because James Nogu is making allegations and he still has not been found, But it's a difficult question, Sometimes we want control, we say we want to control companies, we want to make them be 100% or whatever it is. And when that happens, it also raises all kinds of issues around risk that, the founder is not there, therefore the company can go down, etc., etc. For me, it's really the agreement on the role that the founder is going to play in the company, and if he's determined to make sure that the company doesn't fall apart, and the right of structures that are put in place, governance structures that are hopefully to the satisfaction of the client's GPF themselves, that there is the right board, there is the right technical expertise, management and so on. This company is run even better than it was run before. I don't see any problems with that. I don't see any risks, And we did this transaction deliberately because he wanted to exit completely, and we said, there's no way that you are going to exit completely. We'd like your technical advice. And his response was, I'm around. I mean, I will stay as long as the PIC needs me to stay in the company, albeit with a small exposure, not as exposure as big as I used to, and he becomes an employee instead of a significant shareholder, in other words. So we were comfortable. I'm not sure what makes GPF uncomfortable with this scenario.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Two questions to follow up there. So if you pay him sort of the bulk of the money and he says he will be there for 3 years or so, what stops him from saying, no, I don't want to participate, if the payment is not staggered for him to stay on?
I'm sure the PIC can consider a mechanism to tie him into the transaction for longer,
Just another one, it's a different one, but it's part of Karan Beef. I think it's Mr. Motau, who was the advisor to the BE consortium. The one thing that bothered me, and they said I must ask you, is that he says there was a 10% stake, I think, in EFG, another company, that he was supposed to have, and between you and the others, made sure that he doesn't get that particular stake.
Is that ETG? I think
ETG,
you're
yes.
talking about
Yes,
ETG.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I don't have the details of that, Commissioner. And I don't know how to respond to that, because there was a little bit of disagreement about who brought the transaction to the PIC and who plays what role in this transaction, But I think the team should be able to give the Commission a better answer, because I was not intricately involved in the final details. Yeah. What I know is that there was a dispute between, the role that he was playing in the transaction versus what the team said he was doing. There was a dispute there.
Yes, because I asked, I think, Ms. More, who was chairing that PMC meeting, and she couldn't give me the answer. Yeah. Because we need some answer there,
Yeah. I think probably, I would say the team that's there with Mr. Mutau, I'm sure they can, be persuaded to resolve their issues.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a big issue from where I'm sitting.
Yes, it
or
was
I
about,
used to sit.
Yes, it was about a 10% stake. It wasn't about the advisory fees. It was him being promised a 10% stake. Can you recall that?
No, I don't recall that.
All right.
I don't recall that.
We should ask the deal team then to...
I think, yes. I think it's only fair that they, be brought into one room and, resolve their issues.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, we will now proceed with the Aran oil transaction. Aran Energy House. Apologize.
Yes, I do have
There is not a statement by Dr. Machila on Aran Energy. We have provided his counsel and himself with a bundle of documentation on this transaction, and perhaps Dr. Machila can briefly just first of all tell the Commission about this transaction, and then we can ask him some questions on that.
Suffice to say that we didn't bring the document because we're not sure we're going to treat it today, but we can ask the questions tomorrow if we do have the questions. All right.
Mr. Commissioner,
Is Dr. Machila in a position to give some comment or evidence on Aran?
yes, he is, Mr. Commissioner. Mr. Commissioner, we've been provided with documents by my learned friend, and I'll take Dr. Machila briefly through that documentation in such a fashion that hopefully the transaction will become clear to the Commission, and thereafter questions can be asked of him.
Can you just tell us what's the first part or first page of whatever document you have before you? Because
I'm going to be referring to a memorandum dated the 16th of September 2013. Yes, dealing with the investment of 270 million US dollars in Camac Energy via a private placement of Camac shares on the JSE. It's a memo dated 16th September 2013.
Number 3 of the document. Alex?
Number 3 in the documents before you, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner,
16 September 2013.
Indeed.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I should have placed on record, this transaction is a new transaction that was brought to the investigating team of the Commission. It's work in progress. It's going to take months before we can finalize this investigation. And it's just on that basis that we've agreed with my learned friend that we will introduce this transaction and we will ask some questions from Dr. Machila that we need to go forward with this investigation.
Yes, we'll share this one for the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. May I proceed? So, Dr. Machila, please have a look at the 16th of September 2013 memorandum. You have that.
I've got it.
Okay. This is an investment memorandum dealing with an investment. It's headed of 270 million US dollars into Camac Energy via a private placement of Camac shares on the JSE. And the purpose of the memorandum is to request approval for that amount, 270 million US, equity investment in Camac via the private placement ahead of a secondary listing of Camac Energy Inc. on the JSE. And following that investment, the PIC will own 30% of Camac Energy shares and will be requesting a board seat plus representation on one of the important subcommittees, such as audit and risk.
Yeah.
At the time that this transaction, you were involved with this transaction, what was your position at the PIC?
I was the Chief Investment Officer, Commissioner.
And then if I can refer you to page 22 of that memorandum, paragraph 58, page 22, paragraph 58.
And then?
Paragraph 58.
Okay.
These paragraphs set out the deal.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
And will you just read that for us into the record?
The deal, paragraph 58, Camac Energy Incorporated and its affiliate, Camac Petroleum, will enter into an asset acquisition agreement with Allied Energy and the Allied Energy affiliates, in terms of which it will acquire all of the remaining rights in the PSC production sharing contract not currently held by KMEC Energy.
If I can just stop you there, perhaps we should go back a paragraph and deal with the deal structure and the relationship between CAMAC and Allied Energy at paragraph 54. So will you read those paragraphs 54 through to 57?
Yes. Relationship between KMEC Energy and Allied Energy. This is a deal structure, Commissioner. Allied Energy owns 100% equity in the operating mining licenses, OML 120 and 121. Allied Energy and KMEC Energy Incorporated own economic interest split of 87.5 and 12.5 respectively of the MOL 120 and 121 through a production sharing contract. KMEC Energy Incorporated is purchasing the remaining 87.5 economic interest of the PSC from Allied Energy worth $787 million based on a $0.9 billion valuation. Once completed, KMEC Energy will own 100% of the economic interest in the MOL 120 and 121. Is that fine? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. So in terms of this relationship, Allied and CAMAC were respectively partners, if one can put it that way, in what is called a production sharing contract.
That's correct.
Allied was 87.5%, CAMAC was 12.5%. CAMAC was buying Allied's 87.5% in that PSC or production sharing contract.
That's correct, Commissioner.
And then you proceeded with the deal. You read out paragraph 58, which states what I've just said to you, and then paragraph 59 carries on. Would you read that into the record, please, and further?
59, following the completion of the Allied acquisition, KMEC Energy Incorporated will hold the rights to 100% of the production and the rights to explore and develop all of OML's 120 and 121. The completion of the Allied acquisition will result in KMEC Energy Incorporated net share of production from oil field increasing from the current 215 barrels of oil per day to 2,339,000 barrels of oil per day, and give KMEC Energy the exclusive ability to explore and develop 1.8 thousand square kilometers of acreage offshore of Nigeria. The acquisition will result in a significant majority of KMEC Incorporated business being focused on proven and producing assets, as well as exploration upside in Nigeria, and will provide additional cash flow to fund its exploration program.
Thank you, Doctor. So we know that the purpose of the investment was for the PIC to eventually buy 30% of CAMAC Energy shares. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And that was for an amount of $270 million US.
That's correct.
And how would the disbursement of those funds take place? If you have a look at disbursement and milestones set out in paragraphs 61 through to 63.
It's as follows. The consideration for the Allied Energy asset acquisition will be a combination of US $270 million in cash payable in two tranches, KMEC Energy shares and KMEC Energy shares. It is anticipated that the cash portion of the consideration will be funded by a KMEC Energy share private placement with PIC. It is anticipated that the PIC will enter into a placing agreement with KMEC Energy, in pursuant to which it will invest 270 million in two tranches of 130 million and 140 million respectively at the price of 71.64 US cents per share. There's a table of calculation there. With the first tranche payable at the completion of the Allied Energy assets acquisition, and the second upon completion of the drilling of Oyo 7 well and attaining more than 8,000 barrels per day. The closing of both Allied Energy asset acquisition, the private placing, and the transaction contemplated by Allied Energy acquisition agreement and the purchase agreement are detailed below and are subject to a number of customary conditions precedents set out and included but not limited to the approval of the issuance of shares to Allied and the investor by stakeholders of the company in terms of regulations of the New York Stock Exchange, including majority of shareholders not associated with Allied, the listing of the company's shares on the JSE as a secondary listing.
Thank you, Dr. Machile. Then, if I can take you to the memorandum dated the 18th of February 2014, which is further on in the documentation that you've been given, Commissioners.
18th February.
18 February 2014. Ours are not numbered. Apparently it's Annexure 14, Commissioners. Mine is not numbered.
We've got it.
Thank you. This is a memorandum dated the 18th of February 2014. It's for the PIC board, is that correct?
Yes.
It's an update on the 270 million US investment in Kamak Energy, is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And the purpose of the memorandum is to update the board on that investment.
Yes.
The next paragraph sets out the rationale for the investment. It deals with South Africa's need for oil.
Yes.
And over the page in paragraph 4 deals with why one should invest in Kamak, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. Yes.
Would you briefly give us the rationale as to why the PIC was investing in Kamak?
Okay. I'll read out paragraph 4, which gives an explanation. Why invest in Kamak? That's 4. A, investment was done at a discount to valuation. The proposed investment valuation of $900 million or an entry price of US cents 71.64 US cents represent a significant discount to the intrinsic value of the business. Our valuation only captures OML 120 and 121. KMEC has 6 other reserves. The shares have seen re-rated to $1.63 per share, up over 125 since Q3 of 2013. The valuation football field shows the current valuation based on various methodologies. I think it's paragraph number 10, that's the valuation football field, they call it. Valuation was based on reserves and resources that were verified by an independent third party, and a competent person's report was published. The competent person's report prepared by Gaffney, Klein and Associates states that KMEC had net risk reserves of 81.567 million barrels of oil and leads containing 769 million barrels of prospective oil resources and about 1.493 tera cubic feet of prospective gas resources as at June 2013. KMEC's attributable production is set to increase based on the Field Development Plan, FDP. Indeed, the buyout of the shareholding held by Allied KMEC, KMEC Energy, KMEC owning 100% of OML and 120, means that there will be an immediate increase in production by a substantial amount. PIC will have a board seat in the company as well as representation on the Audit and Risk Committee. That's the rationale.
Then, Dr. Machila, the disbursements of funds were to be dispersed in 2 tranches, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
One was an initial tranche on completion of JSE listing.
That's
Can
correct.
you just explain briefly why there was to be a JSE listing?
The JSE listing was very important for the PIC so that it subject the asset to the local requirements, and therefore giving comfort that the quality of the information that we'll be dealing with would have been approved by a regulator and signed off by reputable companies.
So there would have been what we've heard, a pre-listing statement.
A pre-listing statement, in other words, will have to be issued, a JSE approved pre-listing statement.
And the second tranche was payable on completion of the drilling and attainment of a production rate of 7,000 barrels per day for Oyo 7, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the use of the funds, $100 million would be used for drilling of deep water production well number 7.
That's correct.
And another 100 million to be used for the reduction of the debt associated with the acquisition
That's correct.
of ENI's 40% holdings in OML.
That's correct.
ENI was who in the transaction?
ENI is a Italian-based energy firm that sold its 40% interest in the MOL 121 and 120 to Allied Energy, the way we understand it.
Then Doctor, can I refer you to an extract from the minutes of the board meeting held on the 21st of February 2014. It's the document just before the one that we've been dealing with, so I assume it's 14.
That's right.
Or it's 13.
Yes, 31st of October.
No, 21st of February 2014.
Okay. Sorry, I'm still trying to get to this. Sorry. Okay.
Just use your one.
I think
Use your one.
mine is not marked.
That's fine, but yours is the same.
It's not marked. These are not marked.
Do you have that document, Commissioners?
Is that annexure 13?
Extract from the minutes of the board meeting held on 21st February 2014. Thank you. This is an extract from the minutes of the board meeting held on the 21st of February 2014, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
The purpose was to report on CAMAC, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And it's, the first paragraph reads, it was reported that PIC entered into a private placement agreement with CAMAC Energy in CAMAC during November 2013, pursuant to which it agreed to invest $270 million in exchange for 376 million shares equity in CAMAC prior to the secondary listing of CAMAC on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And paragraph 1.1.2 confirms that the investment would occur in two tranches of 135 million, each payable firstly on the successful completion of the JC listing, and the second tranche payable on the drilling of the Oyo 7 well and attaining more than 7,000 barrels per day. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And this document was then a extract from the minutes of the discussion by the board on this particular transaction, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And I just want to refer you to the last page of that paragraph, 1.1.11.
Yes.
It reads, after a lengthy discussion on the allegations made in the media, PIC's responses to the media and PIC's approach to investment, it was stressed that the board should rely on management's integrity. The board could not take over that responsibility. Management should, however, keep the board abreast of its activities on an ongoing basis. Can you just explain what that was about?
If I recall, there were a lot of media allegations into the newspapers around Allied, and most importantly, the participant or the lead shareholders in there, that they were politically exposed, and the board needed to understand why, what are the issues. And as it says, after lengthy explanation, the board was happy with the investment rationale from management, because this fell within the delegated authority of management, and asked management to take a responsibility for the asset and keep the board, informed on an ongoing basis. Yeah, we've done that.
Okay, so ultimately, did CAMAC list on the JSE?
Commissioner, yes, it was listed on the 24th of February 2014.
And did the PIC pay then the first tranche of 135 million US to it?
Yes, as per the deal structuring and payment.
Then if I can refer you to the last document, I'm not sure what annexion number it is, Mr. Commissioner. It's an extract from the minutes of the Investment Committee meeting held on 3 June 2016. 3 June 2016. It's annexure 20.
Yeah.
Dr. Machila, this is an extract from the minutes of the Investment Committee meeting held on the 3rd of June 2016, is that correct?
That's correct.
It deals with Aran Energy.
Sorry, we're still looking at that page. It's not annexure 20 on our document. And what it could be. You said, what, 6 June? 3 June?
3 June 2016.
Okay, so it looks like it's 21 then, Annexure 21. Okay, yeah, we're here.
Thank you. These minutes deal with the Aran Energy transaction, is that correct?
That's correct.
Paragraph 1.3 sets out the background to the transaction, is that correct?
That's correct.
Then paragraph 1.4 refers to ERN, that we know is Aran Energy. ERN's operational cost and call on cash increased as its level of activity, in brackets build-up of resources, increased until cash costs have, however, unit cash costs have, however, dropped as the fixed cost base was diluted by rising output. This resulted in a rising interest bill as ERN had to raise debt to fund the gap resulting from a shortfall in its targets. And then paragraph 1.5 says ERN has as such approached the PIC for financial support in the form of a $100 million bank guarantee that will allow ERN to raise more capital to fund its growth strategy. The bank guarantee will allow the PIC to support the company without increasing its shareholding above the 30% threshold. The guarantee will have a tenure of 3 years from the date of issue, and no cash will flow from the PRC unless ERN fails to pay the loans that it raises on the back of the guarantee. PIC will receive warrants to purchase shares of common stock from ERN for an amount equal to $20 million, representing 20% of the amount being guaranteed by the PIC, and the strike price of those warrants will be ERN's closing market price on the NYSE, the New York Stock Exchange, on the date of the guarantee. Can you just briefly sketch to us, insofar as you're able to recall, what led to this particular situation approximately 2 years after the listing of Aran on, at least CAMAC on the JSE?
Commissioner, I think shortly after concluding the transaction, the successful listing of Aran Energy on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the oil price started to fall. In fact, I think, if my memory serves me well, it would have started falling around April or so of 2014. A sharp fall in that shortly after we concluded. And at the same time, one of the conditions that we've put here was that within 6 months of disbursement, Aran Energy should have increased production to 7,000, should have hit 7,000 barrels of oil per day. Sorry, that's 2014. That's still 2014. The oil price was still holding quite well, close to $100 at that point. Unfortunately, they ran into technical problems already around September, October of 2014. The rig that was there, that was supposed to drill, experienced technical problems to a point where the contract had to be cancelled. I think they completely removed it from site in January of the following year, 2015. And so they had to bring in a new rig to start to complete the well. Coupled with that, obviously there's no barrels that are coming through as planned, so they had to ask PIC for a waiver of the put option that we've given to them, citing the fact that the drilling problem was out of Aran Energy's control. It was KMEC Energy's control at that time. So they requested us to suspend the exercise of the put or extend it by another 6 months, whilst the new rig comes in to drill. I think that the new rig managed to reach the oil somewhere around May or so in 2015, but already the oil price was beginning to fall very sharply. I think by mid-year, the oil price would have fallen close to 60 US dollars per barrel at that point. But it was just a downward slope, slippery slope in the oil price, without any commensurate production, because you would need a lot more production to make up for the revenues to be able to cover the running costs of the company, operational costs of the company. So there was a serious stress in the financial, the operating costs or financial operability of the company, and thus they approached the PIC for a guarantee of about $100 million, which they will use to then borrow from the banks to drill further wells to increase production. That was the situation that Aran found itself in.
So PIC's exposure at that stage was, in dollar terms, about 100 million.
That will be, yes.
In the form of a guarantee.
Yes, so we had 270 that we have disbursed, first on listing, and then later on to ensure that they do finalize the production after the new rig came on board. But the cash flows, unfortunately, were still strained anyway, so they asked us for a guarantee, so to raise money again. So that's additional 100 million, in other words, on top of the 270 that we've given. Yes.
Just for record purposes, you mentioned that at first the barrels cost something like $100 per barrel. I assume at this time it's US dollars. The bucks that you're talking about is US dollars.
I keep referring to the bucks, Commissioner. Apologies. It's dollars. Yes. Apologies.
And that guarantee, do you know what happened to it? I mean, obviously it was a guarantee, and did the banks lend the 100 million? And what has happened to that guarantee?
The guarantee was approved by the investment committee of the one that we're reading. I think it's what date was it? The 3rd of June. 2016, approved the guarantee, and Mauritius Commercial Bank agreed to provide the funding. Now that guarantee from PIC side, the money was held with Standard Bank, the banker of the PIC/GPF, in other words. Yeah. So once that money was, the guarantee was approved, Aran Energy was able to raise $100 million from Mauritian Bank. But there were conditions to this loan. The key condition was the Commissioner, maybe I can read the resolution of the committee that approved the 100 million to make it easier. So the committee resolved that the provision of $100 million bank guarantee to Aran Energy on behalf of Government Employees Pension Fund be approved, and subject to the submission of the pricing of the guarantee, a percentage of the guarantee amount to the IC, that is the rate of the guarantee, confirmation of the third-party lender. The legal department should confirm that the legal process is correct of issuing this guarantee. The appointment of an independent technical advisor to advise the PIC on the drawdown and the applications of the funds. Confirmation that all the Security Exchange Commission requirements have been met. Confirmation of the insurance, both political and non-political, in place, and what is covered under the political insurance. and the appointment of the CFO as an executive director on the board of Aran Energy. Those were the conditions.
Then insofar as the appointment of a technical advisor is concerned, can I refer you then to the extract from the minutes of the investment committee meeting held on 6th of October 2016?
That's correct. Can I?
What annexure is it?
It's annexure 20, I think.
6th of October 2016. So this is an extract from the minutes of the investment committee meeting held on 6th of October 2016, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
And paragraph 1.26.3 deals with the appointment of an independent technical advisor, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what does that paragraph state?
The paragraph states that management explained that an independent technical advisor would have been costly. Sakwal was engaged as a technical advisor due to their technical expertise in the field and their independence from Aran Energy. A number of Nigerian-based companies were considered as an option, but the PIC was not comfortable with the independence of these companies. Sakwal could further render the service to the PIC at no cost and will submit a proposal including curriculum vitae of individuals who will be involved on the project to the PIC to ensure transparency.
So briefly, what was the issue then regarding Sakwal?
We had recommended Sakwal to be the technical advisor in terms of the approval of the investment committee for the 100 million, the other condition. So then the issue of independence was raised, and we're explaining that an independent service provider will be extremely expensive. Now, Sakwal is a company where the PIC has a significant interest in, and so we felt strongly that they will have will be able to protect the interest of the PIC as the technical advisor to a point where they can even identify an independent technical advisor on the PIC behalf. That was the thinking around this.
And then if I can refer you to the document headed extract from the minutes of the investment committee meeting held on 8 May 2018. Well, in fact, before I do that, was Sakwal appointed as the technical advisor?
Yes, Sakwal was eventually appointed.
And what happened after that?
They performed the work. I think they appointed a Nigerian company, local company called Petrovision, to assist them on the technical side.
And then if I can refer you to the document extract from the minutes of the investment committee meeting held on 8 May 2018.
Where is it? Yeah.
Is the date 8 May 2018?
Indeed, Mr. Commissioner.
It's annexure 19.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. So, Dr. Machila, this is an extract from the minutes of the investment committee meeting held on the 8th of May 2018, is that correct?
That's correct.
Deals with Aran Energy, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what it records the transaction and then the provision of the guarantee, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then paragraph 3.4, it says Aran Energy had drawn down in excess of USD 63 million from the debt facility provided by MCB. MCB is who?
The Mauritian Commercial Bank.
In August 2017, the PIC, upon recommendation of the technical advisor Sakwal, stopped Aran Energy's access to the funding as Aran Energy failed to meet the requirements as per the terms and conditions agreed to under the facility agreement. Can you just explain to the commissioners, if you know, what that is about?
My understanding is that at some stage, actually in the beginning, any invoice that MCB has to pay had to be approved by the PIC through the technical advisor. And so at some stage, Aran Energy started invoicing MCB directly and demanding payment. And we were alerted to that. And it was clear that there were certain invoices that were not part of the drilling process that Aran Energy was trying to get PIC to pay, which we refused. We refused to pay.
So the situation was then that Aran Energy defaulted on its obligations under the loan facility
Under the
from
loan.
MCB, is that
That-
correct?
That's correct. That's
Which
correct.
resulted in MCB calling up the bank guarantee.
Not at that stage yet. I think the only time that they called the bank guarantee is after Aran Energy filed for bankruptcy. So at this stage, the PIC was refusing to pay because we needed full information on the invoices to ensure that they are for the work that they have been, that they are for. And so when Aran Energy began to default on their obligations in terms of the agreements, the PIC then held back the payments. Yeah, held back the payments.
So paragraph 3.6 records that on 26 April 2018, Aran Energy filed for voluntary bankruptcy under Chapter 11 of the United States Code.
Yeah. First, once we withheld payments, Aran Energy took PIC to court in the United States, and nothing came out of that court process. And I think they shifted now to the federal government as well to try to force the PIC to pay. They were citing interference by the PIC in the operations of Aran Energy, which we did not agree with. At that point, we then wrote letters to other shareholders requesting an urgent meeting so that we can discuss the situation of Aran Energy with the view of recommending shareholders to make certain changes to the board and senior management so that we can at least get a handle on the operations of the company. So that's what happened, and then later on, Aran Energy filed for bankruptcy. But parallel to that, as that was happening, it came to our knowledge that actually Allied Energy was also taken to court by a subsidiary of ENI called Ajib of Nigeria. Now, our understanding is that the Allied Energy defaulted on payment to Ajib of Nigeria for the 40% interest that Ajib had sold to them. We got to learn that they only paid about 100 million, whilst there was another 200 million or so outstanding at that time. So all of this information we were not aware of at the time of transacting, and not even disclosed in the pre-listing statement at that time, because that is significant. We should have picked up that there is something between the seller, because Commissioner, we paid 270 million to KMEC Energy and Allied for KMEC to buy out Allied's interest so that KMEC can own 100% of the operation. That's the relationship, but we were not aware that Allied still owes E&I money for the 40% that they bought to take 100% control of the asset. So E&I or IGIP won a court case in London. And our understanding is that then they went to operations and close off everything about the same time. Close off everything. So there was no cash flow to Aran Energy, in other words, because barrels were not moving or being offloaded. And so they couldn't have any cash flows. They filed for bankruptcy at that point.
If you have a look at the memorandum dated the 11th of May 2018, it's towards the beginning of the bundle. In paragraph 12, it says, during February 2018, it came to the attention of the PIC through an online newspaper article that Aran was involved in certain litigation instituted by Nigerian AGIP Exploration Limited. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's the litigation that you've been referring to regarding the outstanding payment for the purchase price of E&I's 40% sale to Allied. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you say that judgment was given in favor of AGIP, which then resulted in the closure of the valve, so to speak,
Yeah.
for Aran, and Aran couldn't sell oil anymore.
That's correct.
Thereafter, Aran filed for bankruptcy.
That's correct.
Okay. What then happened in respect of the guarantee that the PIC had provided for the $100 million debt loan facility from MCB?
Commissioner, at that time, the Aran Energy had drawn down 63 million, so there was a 34 million outstanding. The Mauritius Commercial Bank then exercised its security, called its guarantee, and PIC had to pay the 63 million. 67 million. Sorry, 67 million, Commissioner. That was the amount that was drawn already.
And then if we go back to the extract from the minutes of the Investment Committee meeting held on the 8th of May 2018, it's finally resolved that subsequent to the above discussions, the committee resolved that the PIC be and is hereby authorized to step in and take MCB's position as a lender to Aran Energy on the facility of $100 million and settle the outstanding facility capital and interest amount to MCB and make every effort to have this facility repaid.
Yeah.
Just what led to that?
Yes, this is now MCB calling its guarantee. So,
Sorry, which document are you referring to?
Sorry, Mr. Commissioner, this is one that we have dealt with before. It's the minutes of the Investment Committee meeting on the 8th of May 2018. So the resolution at paragraph 3.11, Commissioners, is that the PIC be authorized to step in and take over MCB's position as a lender, settle the outstanding amount on the facility, and that was what occurred, Dr. Machila.
that's what occurred.
The PIC, the guarantee, wasn't the PIC supposed to pay the $67 million, not the 100 million, because it only paid that,
67, yes.
not 100 million.
Not 100 million, only 67, which was the outstanding amount.
Yeah, but the paragraph says here 100 million.
I think it says PIC is stepping in. So there is
the total.
in total, yes.
In total.
Yes, Commissioner.
Yes,
Commissioner.
but MCB wanted just the part paid by, paid out, basically.
That's correct.
The 67 million that the PIC has got to pay as part of the guarantee.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
I don't have any further questions, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, before we proceed, is it a convenient time for the tea adjournment?
Definitely convenient. We'll adjourn until 25 past.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, I will briefly introduce the questioning, and then my learned friend, Mr. Monahela, who's counsel involved with the forensic team investigating this deal, will ask more detailed questions. Dr. Machila, you mentioned earlier when we talked about Daybreak that this transaction was also introduced by Mr. Shezi. Is that correct?
If I can be clear,
Just give us time. Somebody else is recording.
Okay.
Mr.
Is that-
Botha, can we
Is that
clear?
Mr. Botha there? Yeah.
Yes.
just to clarify, Chair, we were introduced to Mr. Case Lawal by Mr. Sizwe Shezi.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, according to information in our possession, Mr. Lawal is a close friend of the former president, Mr. Zuma. Did you know that?
We read it in the newspapers and we've seen pictures of them together.
And he was also instrumental in the awarding of an honorary doctorate to Mr. Zuma in 2011 in Texas. Do you know that?
We read it in the newspapers, Commissioner.
So, just to summarize then, in 2011, we know from newspaper articles and other information that Mr. Lawal and his friend were involved in the awarding of an honorary doctorate in Texas to Mr. Zuma. In 2013, he was introduced to the PIC by Mr. Shezi. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In 2014, the PIC took a decision to invest 270 million US into this company, Aran. Is that correct?
That's correct. Kamek Energy at the time.
Kamak Energy, and
At the
that
time.
for that investment they will get 30% shares,
That's correct.
and a seat on the board, and a seat on the Audit and Risk Committee of this entity. Is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner.
No, you nodded your head with regard to the seat on the board, Dr. Machila. Is it a yes?
That's correct. It's a yes. It's a yes, Commissioner.
And you initially represented the PIC on the board.
That's correct. I was appointed to the board of Aran Energy in 2015.
And I believe later Mrs. Dudu Schlatzweier, who also testified here previously, then replaced you on the board.
That's correct.
In 2016, there was the 100 million US bank guarantee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And of that, there was a drawdown by Aran of 63 million at the time when you stopped this facility.
Yeah. I think is it 67, 63 or 67, somewhere around there. Yeah. Total. I think it was
67, I think.
67.
And
$1 million.
$1 million. And then in 2018, they filed for bankruptcy.
That's correct.
Can I just quickly make sure that I've got the name of the person who replaced you on the board? Who was it?
Dudu Schlatzweier,
Tlajwai.
Mr. Commissioner. Now, Dr. Machila, you know, in the forensic financial world, there is a saying that if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. As I understand your evidence, you paid 270 million US for shares valued at 900 million US dollars, a huge discount.
No, the value of the company at that time, the value of the assets were $900 million. So 30% will then be 270.
But you said as I understand. Sorry, I misunderstood you there, but it was acquired at a huge discount.
Relative to the share price that was
Yeah.
trading at that time. I think we said that it traded at around 153 in dollars per share versus the 0.71 dollars per share that we pay, or 71 US cents roughly.
And the initial purpose of this investment in Aran was to acquire oil for the Republic of South Africa.
That was an exposure to get a direct exposure to oil producing assets.
And
Not for South Africa, it's too small to make a difference.
Yes. But
So it was just a matter of investment.
It's a matter of investment in oil. Oil, yes.
And there was no plan for them to import some oil into the country here?
That would have been part if production increases significantly.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, at some stage, once they start hitting 10,000 barrels per day, they were selling directly to Glencore. Because apparently the kind of oil that they're producing is commanding a reasonable premium relative to the other brands of good quality.
Yes, and Glencore would just trade it to other countries.
Exactly.
Okay. All
And
right.
I further understood from you that, in hindsight, it now appears that they were not open and honest in the pre-listing statement to the JSE.
That's what we pick up now from information flow, that there must have been a lot of things that were not disclosed to us.
And having spent, it seems to me, if I do the calculation, an excess of 6 billion in this investment, not a single barrel of oil was exported to South Africa. Is that correct?
I think 6 billion is a lot. 270.
If-
Let's work on 370
If we-
million dollars.
If we take it at 14 rand exchange rate at the moment, we in excess of 5 billion, close to 6 billion.
Well, it depends. Somebody 2 years from now will be saying this is with 12 billion. You know,
Yes, it depends
if,
on the
if
price,
the
isn't
rand
it?
gets to 18, 20, this thing, you know.
But in hindsight,
So let's talk about the US dollars. It was 370 US dollars exposure.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And it depends. I mean, you could have bought it at 10 rands to the dollar at that time, say.
That could have been an exchange
could
rate. I
have
can't
been.
remember exactly what it was at that time. Yeah.
Okay.
my last question, Dr. Machila, in hindsight, the only exact science there is, I suppose, it was a very poor investment. Would you agree?
It was a very poor investment. I agree.
My colleague, Advocate Manahela, will ask further questions. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Dr. Machila, I would like us to start with the guarantee that the PIC provided for Aran to obtain a loan of about 100 billion US dollars from Mauritius Commercial Bank. May I refer you to the extract from the minutes of the investment committee held on 6 October 2016? Mr. Commissioner, my numbering is 19. I believe yours would be 20. Yes, extracts from the minutes of the investment committee meeting held on 6 October 2016. Dr. Machila, you've testified that SAC Oil was appointed a technical advisor to the PIC. I want to refer you to paragraph 1.26.2 of that extract. It reads as follows. Committee members raised a concern that one of the conditions to the approval of the transaction was the appointment of an independent technical advisor with an arm's length relationship to advise the PIC on the use of the funds. SAC Oil, who was subsequently appointed as PIC's advisor, was not independent. SAC Oil is an operator and not a technical advisor in the true sense of the word. Do you agree that SAC Oil was an operator and not a technical advisor in the true sense of the word?
That's what the minutes are saying.
Then at paragraph 1.26.3, it says the following: management explained that an independent technical advisor would have been costly. SAC Oil was engaged as the technical advisor due to their technical expertise in this field and their independence from Aran Energy. A number of Nigerian-based companies were considered as an option, but the PIC was not comfortable with the independence of these companies. SAC Oil could further render the services to the PIC at no cost and will submit a proposal, including curriculum vitae of the individuals who will be involved on the project, to the PIC to ensure transparency. What do you understand by SAC Oil could further render the service to the PIC at no cost?
I don't know.
You weren't part of the investment committee, were you?
I was part of the investment committee, but I can't remember what this meant at the time, Commissioner.
And your previous answer was that the minutes say so. What do you say? Where the paragraph before the last one that was just read says SAC Oil is an operator and not a technical advisor.
Commissioner, this is the minutes of the meeting. I might have been present, but when the committee says yes, this is how we feel about this organization, that they are probably not a technical, and we agree in a meeting and it's captured that way. I'm bound by that decision.
When SAC Oil was appointed, did you yourself now personally accept that they could act as technical advisors?
The appointment of advisory and those kind of services are done by the team, and then they then submit to the committee for approval. So I wouldn't interfere with that part of their responsibility. So I will then get this as part of the investment committee, and they will deliberate and decide on whether we. So that is the process. This is an investment committee matter.
Does the investment committee not interrogate recommendations or reports?
They would interrogate.
Yes.
They would interrogate. You know, Commissioner, I have a discomfort. That's why I'm saying this, because it's now going to look like this is my view and this is the decision of Dan Machila. And I feel a little bit uncomfortable with that. That's why I'm saying these are minutes of the committee where I was present and I'm bound by the decision. And not that I have a different view or I become the owner of this, in other words.
You are unable to say you had a different view or you have a different view to what the IC said.
No, I agree with IC. Yeah.
Assume as technical advisors, SAC Oil would have received a fee?
I would assume that there must have been a fee arrangement. I haven't seen the documentation relating to how much they're going to be paid for these services.
That was out of your hands now.
There's also a possibility that they would have proposed to me, subject to PIC approval, that I would normally sign payments in the ordinary course of my work. So when the IC has agreed and there are payments to be made, depending on the size, it may come to the office as well for approval. But I don't remember signing off on invoices to pay Sakoil in this instance.
I assume there would be a record somewhere in the PIC office.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Dr. Machila, I believe you will agree with me that it was agreed that SACOL would be paid a fee.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, that there must be a contractual arrangement where fees are going to be paid.
And actually, there is, and you are the person that signed that contract on behalf of the PIC. And I refer you to Annexure 1 of the documents that you have been referring to.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been recommended to me for signature
By who?
by the team. I mean, there must be a memo that says we've now appointed a fora, because this is an approval that we look for a technical advice, and the team would have given me a memo to that effect.
May I refer you to clause 1 of that agreement? That's on the first page. It deals with the scope of work. At paragraph 1.1, which is phase 1, due diligence phase, it says the following. The purpose of this phase is to provide conclusions and quantified assessment of the technical risks to the satisfaction of the PIC in their consideration of providing financial support to Aran in respect of the project. The technical advisor shall prepare a final due diligence report based upon a comprehensive evaluation of the scope of work in phase 1. And then it proceeds to set out what the technical advisor will do. And A is review of reserves, evaluation and production assessment. I won't go to the detail, through the detail. And then B, review process facilities, pipeline network, the back option, metering, and tank farm or host. C, review of financial projections and economic model. And D, check on project team, contracts, permits, and approvals are in place for successful execution of the project. Do you know if SACOIL performed those duties?
Commissioner, I wouldn't know. Those reports would be with the team that deals with, that monitor the projects. I don't monitor the project.
But based on what's stated in the minutes that I referred you to, that SACOIL was not a true technical advisor, was not a technical advisor in the true sense of the word. Do you think SACOIL would have been able to perform the duties set out at A?
Commissioner, my understanding is that SACOIL was appointed. They produced this letter which covers the full work that they need to deal with, to produce for the PIC or to do for the PIC. And they were free to appoint a technical advisor alongside them if they don't have that expertise. That was my understanding.
Will you agree with me that the fees set out in this agreement included performing those duties listed at A?
I would imagine so, Chair.
Mr. Commissioner, may I just ask for a moment? May I refer you to clause 4 of that agreement, which deals with the fees. Mr. Commissioner, may I just be allowed to look for the relevant part of the clause?
Commissioner, while he's reading, can I just help here? I don't deal with the finer details of contracts. My colleagues will tell me that this is what the service provider is going to do and recommend that they go ahead and do and procure those services. I sign off on that, and they have to monitor performance according to this contract. They can only report to me that so-and-so is complying or not complying if they require my intervention. But I wouldn't even know the finer details of this contract because I'm advised by people under me who have the technical expertise and know how to advise me. Can you imagine running a 2 trillion fund where I have to look at each detail of every little correspondence or contract that comes through the PIC? That's humanly impossible. I wouldn't be able to do that. I'm supported by people who have that technical expertise, whether it's legal or it's technical or it's ESG team or whoever. Those are people who will support me with the technical expertise and make recommendations. To me, if it's something that's not within their delegated of authority, they will pass it on to me, or else they can deal with it in terms of the delegation. Now, I'm not going to be able to answer some of the technical questions around this contract here, unfortunately. What I know is that we have appointed the technical advisor. They can be not independent or independent, but we've said to committee that we believe that they can do the job. And even though this independent or lack of independence that they're talking about is because Sacoil is owned by the PIC on behalf of GPF. It owns a significant amount. And really, the reason why we use them is because we know them. They are a subsidiary. They will be able to look after our interest versus someone else that we don't know from the Nigeria or whatever. That was the thinking, and the IC was okay with that. They didn't say stop. They said proceed on that basis. That's why we left them to continue with the process. So I have a challenge here that I'm going to be asked technical questions as if I deal with the work of somebody way, way below me. You know, I wouldn't be able to see that as a CEO.
That's fair enough. You will answer questions that you are able to answer. Those that you aren't able to answer, you'll simply say, no, that's dealt with, as you mentioned. It's dealt with by the committee or by someone else, and so on.
And Commissioner, it will be useful if technical people are called to say, did they deliver on this in terms of this? Because I wouldn't know that they have dealt with these matters. Have they been paid this amount or whatever it is? Because I'm not in a position. But anyway, let's hear what the question is. Let me not preempt what I'm going to be asked.
Yes, yeah. This is different because typically we get the technical people first, you know, to deal with the issues, and then maybe perhaps you deal with the bigger ones, you know. So this was brought differently.
I appreciate that, Commissioner, but if the commissioner can understand that I was the CEO and not somebody dealing with, technical work or finer details of the work, really. Otherwise, it will be unfair, if I get asked questions and I'm unable to answer, I look like,
Yeah, we get it. 2 trillion rand is a big company, so you can't know all the stuff there.
The only thing, of course, here, in this instance, if you look at, let's say, paragraph 60 in general, and the signatures that follow, one of them looks like your signature.
Yes.
Confirm
yes.
that that's yours.
That's right. That's right.
And usually that's where the questions come in, that you sign the document and you're supposed to know what is in the document. So probably that's where the questions come in. I'm not sure, but as I said earlier, if you are able to answer a question, answer it. If you aren't able to, say so.
Okay, Commissioner.
Mr. Monai.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, that's exactly where I was going. That Dr. Machila signed the agreement, and we know what the Latin maxim, caveat subscriptor says, that he would have familiarized himself with the contents of the agreement.
It would be expected that he familiarized himself. Whether he did or not is another matter. But you can carry on with asking
Commissioner,
questions.
it sounds good in Latin, but practically it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Can you imagine what the president of the country would be having to do as well? Because I'm sure he signs a lot of stuff, but he's supported by technical people, very technical. And we can understand, he can't come back and say, but I didn't sign it, because he's the one with signing powers, the one with authority to bind the organization to certain things.
To use
to
use a term that you used, the buck stops with you at the PIC.
It depends on the nature and size of the buck. Some bucks may be outside my delegated authority, so.
Yes.
Okay,
And if I may just add to what Mr. Commissioner has said, Dr. Machila was the CEO, as he has said. In terms of the PFMA, he was the accounting authority of the PIC.
Commissioner, these are assets under management. PFMA doesn't apply to assets under management. We're not contracting for corporation. We're contracting on behalf of the clients.
All right, let's see how it goes. You may continue, Mr. Monai.
Okay. Dr. Machila, you testified that SAC Oil appointed Petrovision to assist them on the technical side. What did you mean by that?
Maybe what kind of assistance would they give?
Commissioner?
Kind of assistance would they give to the technical team?
This will be things that SACWEL wouldn't be able to do. The technical aspects of whether it's, I don't know, they check production, they check how much has been drilled. There are all kinds of technical report that needs to be looked at. And if SACWEL is not able to do that, they will be advised by the technical team, accordingly.
And what that may include the duties set out at paragraph 1.1a of the agreement.
I'm sure, because we haven't restricted SACWEL to specific deliverables. They will do all the work around the transaction. Are you talking about? Yes.
Mr. Commissioner, the paragraph that I was looking for earlier and that I wanted to refer to in the agreement is paragraph 5, costs and expenses. It reads as follows. The fees detailed in clause 4 do not include 1. Costs or disbursements made on behalf by the technical advisor to third parties in connection with the agreement, and 2. Out-of-pocket expenses incurred by the technical advisor in the execution of the scope of work. Dr. Machida, do you accept that Petrovision, which was appointed by SAC Oil, was a third party to this agreement?
Yes.
Do you also accept that according to clause 5, the PIC would be liable for Petrovision's fees?
That's how I understand it.
And if SAC Oil was not able to perform the duties set out at paragraph 1.1a, and they had to be performed by Petrovision, the PIC would be liable to pay Petrovision's fees?
That's my understanding of the contract.
And if I may refer you to paragraph 4 of the agreement, it sets out the fees that were due to SAC Oil, or that would be due to SAC Oil.
Yes, yes.
And if the PIC were to pay SAC Oil those fees and also pay Petrovision for its services, it would be paying double. Do you agree?
Double for?
Let me put it this way. If SAC Oil was not to perform the duties set out at paragraph 1.1a, then it would not be entitled to the fees relating to those duties.
It's hard to answer that question because I don't have full information on what was done and therefore fees were paid double. You know, I don't have that analysis, but this may be possible, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if SAC Oil did not perform, and this is just an assumption, if SAC Oil did not perform those duties in paragraph 1.1a and it was paid, and Petrovision performed them and it was paid, that will mean that the PIC paid twice, but it only received the service from only one service provider.
Commissioner, I don't know the actual because now we are working on assumptions. And I'm sure there is information that says who has paid what, and therefore we don't have to make even assumptions here because we can say that this is how much Petrovision was paid and it was double and no work was performed.
But I assume the PIC would get one invoice, and that would be from whoever they contracted, which is SAC Oil, isn't it?
Most probably, I would assume, because this will be the principal, you know,
And one
in
would
terms of this transaction, in terms of this appointment.
And one would expect that if SAC Oil paid some money to whoever they contracted to do the job, that amount would be included in their invoice, not necessarily showing that this amount we paid to someone else.
I don't know, but under normal circumstances, PIC can request the full invoices, even to third parties, to make sure that, because if it's going to pay for third parties, it has to see. It says here that the PIC will be liable for certain third party payments. You know, so naturally they will want to know what they are paying for as well.
Mr. Commissioner, we will check that and we will get back to the commission if we get the information on the issue.
Commissioner, maybe if I can ask, what is in dispute here? Have we appointed Sakwel illegally, or what is what I'm trying to get to? You know, so
I wouldn't know, or we wouldn't know. I suppose that will come out in the questioning from council.
Mr. Commissioner, I'm just trying to establish whether the interests of the PIC were protected as they were supposed to be.
You don't have to answer now. Let's wait for the next question.
Mr. Commissioner, may I just ask for leave to hand up the 2 copies of the risk report relating to the guarantee? I've already made copies available to Dr. Majila and his counsel.
You want us to give it an annexure number or exhibit number, or shall we simply add it to the
Yes,
annexures that we got here?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
And so that will be annexure 24. Yeah.
Dr. Majila, evidence before this commission is that Aran was technically insolvent when the PIC provided the guarantee. Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure, Commissioner.
Well, you're not sure whether you knew, or you're not sure whether they were in fact technically insolvent.
That's right, that they were technically insolvent. Yeah.
Okay. May I refer you to paragraph 6 of the risk report that you have before you? Or we may start at paragraph 5.1, which reads as follows. We are of the view that the prospects of Aran Energy Corporation management successfully turning the company around are largely dependent on the ability to raise additional capital and restructuring the liabilities and the support of shareholders. We therefore recommend that the PIC Investment Committee approve the PIC to provide a $100 million bank guarantee to third-party lenders to reiterate shareholder support to Aran Energy Corporation. And then paragraph 6.1, which is the only one that I will refer to under 6, reads as follows. Subject to the following, Aran's management successfully reaching agreement with creditors not to exercise their rights to place the company into receivership. Do you know if that condition precedent was fulfilled before the guarantee was approved?
I would assume so.
So can I take it that you are not sure?
I'm not sure because the IC has approved, and there are people who then implement the decision of the investment committee. I think people who are better placed to tell us what happened, because I'm part of IC, we're saying the risk is recommending something to the committee. Now, the committee either accept or does not accept. What the committee's final decision will come with a resolution that says, do this, subject to this and that and that. Things that are not in the resolution means that the committee would have been comfortable with. Now, perhaps we need to look at the resolution to see if this concern that is raised by risk is part of that. If it's not part of that, it means the committee must have been comfortable that this deal can go ahead without this clause. This is a risk committee. It's a risk recommendation to the investment committee. We need to understand it that way.
But the reason they said they made paragraph 6.1 a condition precedent was to protect the interests of the PIC. Do you agree?
That's correct. That's correct.
Do I understand you correctly that the IC could, for instance, say, we're not worried about 6.1, and therefore it won't be in the resolution?
They may say we're not worried about 6.1 because it's adequately dealt with elsewhere. They wouldn't just push it aside, Commissioner. There has to be a mitigant to any of the risks that are highlighted there for them not to make find themselves in the resolution. Then it means there is a risk mitigating, strategy around it.
But most of the time, I suppose, the IC would accept the recommendation if it is happy with the transaction.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So if the IC ignores the recommendation by risk, wouldn't it be exposing the PIC to the risk identified?
Commissioner, I don't believe IC would have ignored the risk, or any issue that is raised by risk. If it's not finding itself in the resolution, then it means there must have been a mitigating strategy around that particular risk that make them comfortable that it can go ahead. So there is no way that IC can ignore a risk that's not being managed at all.
Commissioner, we will try to find a copy of the minutes of the IC relating to the approval of the guarantee.
I thought we have those minutes. We do have those minutes. I think so.
The approval of the guarantee, those are there.
I think we do have the approval of the guarantee somewhere.
Do you need some time?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Do you need us
If
to
I may be of assistance, Mr. Commissioner, it's the very last document. It's the extract from the minutes of the Investment Committee on the 3rd of June 2016. I think it should be Annexure 20 or 21 in your bundles. That's the minutes of the Investment Committee meeting that approved the guarantee.
Did you say 3rd of June 20?
It's 16.
16. Yes, it is 21.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, I appreciate my learned friend's assistance. Dr. Machida, may I refer you to paragraph 1.23 of that extract?
listen to the recording.
Will you agree with me that the condition precedent that was recommended by risk does not appear in the resolution?
Yes, it's not in the resolution.
May I refer you to paragraph 1.19 of the same document? It reads as follows. The Risk Department highlighted that negotiations in terms of the conversion of the loans are ongoing. The biggest conversion will be the Allied loan. Allied is owed 135 million US dollars, and they have agreed to convert 100 million US dollars into equity. The terms of the funding, as well as the drilling contract, are critical. The PIC should appoint an independent technical advisor tasked with providing quarterly feedback to the PIC on the company's performance. Aran should provide the PIC with warrants for a total consideration of 20 million US dollars at the strike price of Aran's closing market share price on the New York Stock Exchange on the date of the guarantee. Will you agree with me that the same condition precedent that I referred to also does not appear on paragraph 1.19?
Commissioner, it shows that the investment committee is comfortable with the process around this issue, because they are saying negotiation in terms of conversion of loans to equity is ongoing. So, which means that the process of curing the balance sheet to ensure that Aran Energy is not insolvent is ongoing. And therefore, the committee is comfortable, I would assume. That's why you don't see this coming up in the resolutions.
Is there any reason why that condition precedent was not stated in the, if you know, in the resolution?
Well, I don't know. I'm just trying to explain what I think the reason why it's not finding itself in the resolutions is because this conversion process is ongoing, and therefore IC is comfortable that, you know, the balance sheet is being cured to ensure that it's not insolvent. That's my understanding of the situation.
And therefore that paragraph of the resolution is not necessary.
It's not necessary, Commissioner. That's what it means.
Okay. May we then move to the equity investment of 270 million US dollars. You testified that two conditions precedent were imposed, one being, or that the amount would be released in two tranches. One, after listing of secondary listing of Aran on the JSE, and two, the second one after the completion of the drilling of Oyo 7 well and it being able to produce a certain number of barrels per day. Do you know if those conditions precedent were fulfilled?
Commissioner, the listing happened on the 24th of February 2014. Yeah, I think that's yes. And the conditions of the barrels, as I've explained earlier, were not met because the rig that was drilling had problems, and it had to be demobilized and removed from site, replaced with another one, which came in around January 2015, I think. Then that drilling process started. Oil was only able to flow around the end of May 2015. So in that process, Aran Energy or KMEC Energy requested PIC to relax that condition so that the money can flow to complete the well, because they had already spent quite a bit of money on the rig. And my understanding is that they had now claimed for insurance. I don't know what became of that claim against the rig that failed to function. So they then Aran Energy requested PIC to relax the put option and the conditions to allow them to draw down on the rest of the facility to complete the well. PIC agreed, and indeed the well was completed, and I said production started around the end of May. So the 7,000 barrel required was exceeded, albeit late, not as per timetable.
Were you aware at the time of the investment that KMEC, which subsequently became Aran, was technically insolvent?
No, Commissioner.
So you were not aware of KMEC's third quarter filing with the New York Stock Exchange, in which they made it clear that they were technically insolvent?
No, I was not aware.
That be something that you would expect risk to do, risk committee?
And the team, technical team responsible for monitoring the investment in KMEC or Aran Energy. There are portfolio managers. This asset is assigned to someone in the equities team to look after, and they will report. Their duty is to make sure that they keep us appraised on the performance of the company.
And you don't recall whether they mentioned anything about the technical insolvency?
I don't recall that, Commissioner.
May I refer you to the memo dated 16 September 2013?
Memo
And page 16.
Sorry, you say memo of?
16 September 2013. It's number 3.
And you're referring to page?
Page 16 of the memo, Mr. Commissioner.
It says KMEC Financials.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner. According to that document, didn't KMEC's liabilities exceed its assets, or current liabilities exceed its current assets?
Where is this calculation? Can you see this?
I can't even read it.
You can't even read it.
Can you even see it?
Where are we reading, Commissioner? I'm still trying to get to that page here.
That's 2012. Column 2012, page 16 of the memo.
Page 16 of the memo. No, that's 18. No, this is the right one. So you're talking about current assets, right?
And current liabilities. the last one, Mr. Commissioner, to your right.
I think the JSC was here and they explained this, that current liabilities versus current assets, it's just a cash flow issue. It doesn't mean that they are insolvent. I think the JSC was here and explained this. That's why they were able to even approve the pre-listing statement. Otherwise, they wouldn't have approved the pre-listing statement.
Would you call that a liquidity issue?
Yes, liquidity issues, the short-term
Versus-
liquidity issues,
Yes, it's
not,
called-
yeah,
Yeah, would that be called liquidity issue?
exactly.
And Aran never recovered, and that's why it ended up filing for bankruptcy.
Aran never recovered because the oil price simply fell out of bed. Their revenues are dependent on the oil price. When the oil price drops and you can't generate or produce more barrels to counter that, you are in a big problem. So that's what happened to Aran Energy.
But there was also a dispute on the assets. Don't you think that also affected?
The dispute on the assets we were not aware of. But yeah, the assets, the issue of assets we were not aware of until there was a court ruling.
There was when last year.
Yes.
And after you became aware that there was a dispute regarding the assets, the PIC wanted to take over the operations.
Operations of Aran Energy. Remember, we are at Aran Energy level. We don't know the underlying contracts between Allied and ENI or IGP at that point.
I'm talking about the operations of Aran Energy in which the PIC invested.
I don't understand, Commissioner.
Dr. Machila, in 2018, you became aware that Aran had filed for bankruptcy.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thereafter, the PIC came up with the Aran Energy rescue plan and strategy.
Commissioner, that was a proposal, based on once the PIC got to understand what the issues were and who the players were, we were invited to the stakeholders meeting, a combination of creditors as well as other shareholders, to see how Aran Energy could be saved. And we were part of those discussions, and we thought the biggest creditor that seems to have to be in a stronger position of advantage was Zenith Bank, who had a claim on the assets and were prepared to work with the PIC to exercise their rights and make PIC a new investor in a much cleaner assets going forward. So that was the proposal on the table. It was never executed, if I remember. It was still a thought. It was still an idea.
And the proposal was that the PIC should invest a further $250 million US.
Commissioner, I don't know about that. All I know is that there was a $33 million that was still outstanding from the 100 million, only 67 million was spent. And the idea between PIC and Zenith was that the asset could be restarted, and the government of Nigeria will be quite happy to have both Zenith as a banker, providing the necessary debt, and an equity investor in the PIC alongside a Nigerian operator would be a better solution to save the company going forward. That was the idea. And in the plan, I remember quite well, the restart would have cost a small amount of money, you know, if I remember, quite a small amount of money. But once the restart succeeds, then it will require funding to get other wells into production, and then in that way the company would be safe. That was, I don't know about the 250. Even if it was there, it must just been an idea that was being debated at that time.
May I refer you to an extract from the minutes of the draft board meeting held on 16 November 2016, and that's how it's worded. Mr. Commissioner, my numbering is 11, yours should be 12.
What date? 16 November 2016.
16th October, is that what you're saying?
16 November 2016.
No, our 12 is 31st of October 2014, so let's check.
Yeah.
That's where reference is made to the 250 million US dollars. May I just read out paragraph 5.1.2 thereof, Mr. Commissioner?
This is paragraph 5. This is a what's the date again?
16 November 2016.
Okay.
Commissioners, bear with us, ours is not numbered, so we have to page through these things from backwards to front.
Yes, even us here, even us a bit.
November 2016. This one.
That's the one. Where is it? Let me just have a look. I can see.
Yeah, it's that one.
Mr. Commissioner, I've just realized that there is a problem with the numbering even in one of the documents that we have.
We've now gone through our documents twice and we can't find the 16 November one. Did you say 16 November?
Commissioner, can I just request maybe that this date be checked?
Okay.
I don't think we have that annexure actually here, because
It
we've
will-
gone
it will-
through twice.
It will be handed up.
This date is not correct. This date is not correct. Okay, say so. Can't be correct.
that'll be Annexure 25.
It can't be. I mean, yeah, this guy said this has the security in 2018. Yeah, we've got it.
Yes, I wanted to refer to paragraph 5.1.2 of that document, Mr. Commissioner. It reads as follows.
Before you read, Commissioner, I think this date of 16 November 2016 needs to be checked, because there's no chance that Zenith would be in a position to exercise in 2016. It's only in 2018 that they are after they file for bankruptcy, and therefore they are now exercising their security. I think it may be incorrect, Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, I agree that it is incorrect, and it is clear from the paragraph itself that the date should be 16 November 2018, because there is a sentence that reads as follows: the terms of the agreement would be negotiated on 26 November 2018.
And I don't think they would have called me after saying I must leave the organization, that I must come and negotiate and take responsibility for the $250.
Well, I'm
Sorry,
also,
Commissioner.
I'm also looking at the heading of the document. Extract from the minutes of the draft board meeting held on November 16 November. Draft board meeting, what is that?
That should be a mistake, like a mistake was made on the date.
It was a practice run, Mr. Commissioner.
But can you use this document if there are questions around it?
No, I just wanted to point out that the proposal was about the PIC investing another 250 million US dollars.
You can ask the question.
Dr. Machila, do you agree that the proposal that you referred to included the PIC investing approximately 250 million US dollars as stated in paragraph 5.1.2?
Commissioner, this is a discussion. I don't see any resolution that says PIC must invest. It's still just a proposal.
That is exactly what I called it, a proposal, not a resolution.
Would you know if the board dealt with this issue?
Commissioner?
Would you know if the board dealt with this matter?
From what I hear, PIC took long, and the federal government of Nigeria decided to take the asset.
By the government of Nigeria taking the asset, do you agree with me that the PIC has lost the money it invested in Aran?
Yes.
Those will be my questions, Mr. Commissioner.
Commissioner, we also have to remember that you can't get everything right in investments. There will always be bad ones. As long as you learn from the bad ones, not for them to repeat again, but there will be new bad ones for some other reasons. So that's investment. But as long as you have a well-diversified portfolio, similar to the GPF one, you can withstand some of these losses.
Yes, you suffer losses and you gain in others.
You must gain more in others to really make up for the losses, mistakes that you make in others. That's the nature of investments.
But what's the total loss here? 270 plus 63, is that it? Or
That will be.
am I wrong?
That will be. Yes, it's 270 plus 63. That will be around 330, 33. Which, as a percentage of a portfolio, because we deal with billions and trillions, it's 0.0. I won't be. It's a fraction of a percentage of the portfolio, very small fraction. But Commissioner, it doesn't mean that it's insignificant, and therefore it mustn't be looked at closely and understand what went wrong, so we can learn and tighten. PIC can tighten the processes going forward.
For someone
That is
like
important.
for someone like me, it is a lot of money, particularly that it's in US dollar terms.
Commissioner, if we tell you where some other monies that we've made out of good decisions, it dwarfs what you're seeing here in terms of losses. We did 20 billion on Anglo alone.
Is that it, Mr. Monahan?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, perhaps we should be reminded what Dr. Machila just said. I believe one of the motivational speakers once said that fail means first attempt in learning. So perhaps that is what we have here. But that's the evidence on Aran. We're ready to proceed, but perhaps it's an opportune time to have the early lunch agenda.
There are still some questions.
I would like to ask some questions, Mr. Commissioner, subject to the commissioners asking questions. I don't know whether there's any questions from them.
Yeah, I got some questions, but we could have more questions because we were not aware that we'll be dealing with this company today, all right? So I'll just ask broad ones, and then possibly maybe tomorrow we can ask further questions. The first one is, we had someone, from the PIC who said that, I just cannot recall the person's name, but they mentioned that he was at Stanlip and they had seen this transaction before, and that transaction then was done. But he says it was seen by Stanlip, and Stanlip said no, they couldn't do it. But then why he was surprised when he arrived at the PIC that this was done.
Mr. Commissioner, if I may be of assistance, it was Mr. Jeff Chikodo.
Yes, Chikudo, yes.
Yeah.
Chikudo.
Yeah. It was Jeff Chikudo. Yeah, at the time, I remember at the time when we were busy with the guarantee, we asked him to be part of the team that was going to do due diligence and ensure that, everything is in place, as I said, for us to be able to provide this guarantee from the planning perspective, because this was supposed to be for drilling and only drilling, So he wrote a report. He told us to tell us that he was indeed approached at that time. They declined to invest at that time in Aran. I think it was on the fundraising, additional fundraising, after the first tranche of 30% was done. They were trying to raise additional money in the JSC. They didn't participate.
Yeah, just to be clear, so he said that it seems that the PIC didn't have the skills to invest in this business, so it's why maybe at the beginning the work done was not to the best of ability and all that.
I think the challenge with investments is that you'd always, as an investor, you're not necessarily gonna have all the things you need, all the expertise. So you will rely on others. In the PLS, once it's produced, it's reliance placed on the sponsors, that they've done the work, they've checked all the numbers, so that those that do not have the technical expertise can still invest on the basis of the quality of the information that they get. You know, that the regulator would have said, it's fine, you can make a decision out of this. So that's basically what it is. We didn't necessarily have strong oil and gas exploration / kind of a person internally. But reliance was on the quality of numbers as per PLS.
Then the next one is about corporate governance, maybe dishonesty and other things. I mean, you mentioned that the $200 million owed by Kemek, I think, to Alliance or to Ajip. You guys didn't know about it and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, what is that? Is that a poor due diligence, or is just poor corporate governance from the Kamek side, or is that just normal dishonesty and all that?
It's a biggest challenge if someone hides information from you that is material, then you know you have a serious problem. If that material information was included in the PLS, it maybe the listing wouldn't have proceeded anyway, you know. So the fact that that information was hidden from us is obviously dishonesty, you know, of the highest degree.
But how do you, I mean, and I know, you know, like it has happened for companies here putting money in the African countries, whether it's in mining and other places. How does the PIC guard against those kind of issues? It's, you know, trusting your partners, your business partners and everything. I mean, you know, locally here, that thing is less, but how do you guard against such issues, poor corporate governance, dishonesty, you know, like this?
I mean, it's a big challenge. I mean, if you're dealing with people that are dishonest, they will defraud you. I mean, I don't know how you detect that. It will be quite hard to detect. Even if you sit on the board, it may remain undetected. I mean, Steinhoff is a nice example of how spectacularly you get it wrong when you are being defrauded, you know, and it's organized in a way that it's quite difficult for even auditors to detect. Then you know you have a serious problem. Same with VBS, you know, if very important, you know, organization or role players that do not warn you of certain dangers, you know, and their responsibility is to do just that, to warn you against dangers, and they don't do it, you are in trouble.
But don't you look at these countries and say, in Nigeria will belong to the business chamber there, and they would know that this person is good, this one is not good? I mean, how do you go to check your business partners, isn't it? You go to know the business partners. So doesn't the PIC actually look at belonging to these business chambers in this country so that, you know, other business people would know that this person you cannot touch with a barge pole? You know?
I think those are things that can be put in place going forward, you know. I'm sure they can refine the way they do business, and the level of intelligence can be improved significantly to, you know, to help the PIC manage its risk better. You know, yeah.
Okay. And then The final question is just a broad one on transactions, and it's part of our terms of reference. And tell me if I'm wrong here. Sort of it appears that transactions can go wrong. Okay, there are many that go right. So let's say, but those that go wrong, it could be, at the beginning, meaning poor due diligence and the other things, and it could be during that particular transaction. As we said with Daybreak, it was corporate governance and management, and then it could be at the exit stage, as we saw with the bank, the bank, that there was some agreement which was not signed properly, or there were terms
VBS,
which
yeah.
yes, yes. So in this transaction, where did the PIC go wrong, and what could have been done better? Where do you think? Because it was a total disaster in the end. In the end, yes.
Yeah.
What could have the PIC done better? At the beginning, was it a DD problem or carrying out the project? And even now it's in bankruptcy, but the security seems not to be there in the exit stage.
Yeah.
Am I right in sort of putting those three pots maybe? Or
It's hard because, I mean, in all cases, if you look at Daybreak, for example, which we explained earlier on to say, right at inception, once the deal was approved, we failed to check that all the governance structures are in place to accept the money, and therefore ensure that that money goes and the company is run properly. In Aran /VBS, we've seen serious challenges of, I would say, the legal risks not being managed properly. Legal risk there was a little bit weak in terms of in-depth understanding of what the exposure we have, legal risk exposures we are taking in this company. Those transactions that have happened and not concluded properly, that we didn't know about, came to bite us in the end. So there has to be a deeper level of legal risk assessment there. We thought using the JSC as a way of improving on scrutiny and therefore better quality of numbers signed off by the regulator will give us comfort that this is an asset that we can invest in, but they seem to have done the same with the JSC anyway, because the PLS was approved on the basis of the information that they gave to the JSC, and therefore that filtering process didn't catch, unfortunately, if I may use those words. So it's a variety of things to think about, that one has to be aware of. Legal risk on exit, we find ourselves without the security on the 350 million contract facility at VBS. Whilst we thought this was ring-fenced, actually, it was not supposed to be part of assets of the bank. But in the execution of the legal contracts or legal agreements, these things are sneaked through, and then we sign off, and that's unfortunately what happened. It's a level of dishonesty that is clear there, So if your colleagues don't protect the organization against such legal risks as well, they become lax, then you are exposed to a serious problem.
Yes, just to check, the legal department on these transactions, was it the PIC's legal department, or you outsource this to sort of good technical legal firms that deal with oil and gas and all that?
Normally that's what should happen. If we don't have expertise internally of dealing with complicated technical matters of oil and gas, they will identify a company to assist in drafting such contracts and advising on how it's done.
But do
I
you
don't know,
know-
even
yeah,
in
do you
this
know if it
instance,
was done?
if it was done that way. I don't remember. I only know that in the end, when we were fighting, that we then appointed a legal firm to assist us, you know. But internally, I'm not sure. I haven't checked the contract as to who was actually advising us
Yeah.
on the technical aspects, legal aspects of the transaction
Yeah.
at that point.
But you would agree that for such highly technical material, you probably might need an outside counsel, law firm to look at this?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think also, look, I don't want to say we have to rely on the JSC. I mean, it's done us well over time. It's just one or two instances where, you know, for some reason, PLS are not a true reflection of the actual, you know, and I'm sure the investors also need to up the game from their side in terms of being given an ability to interrogate certain things a lot deeper, rather than complete reliance on the JSC to say they'll do all the work and get sign-off from competent or reputable and JSC-approved service providers to give comfort in the PLS. So that sort of challenge, we've just relied 100% on the PLS as the document that we can make decisions on.
Yeah, and yes, and can you see, you know, why the PLS, you know, in IO2 it was an issue, you know, that even if you have a PLS, maybe you must do your own DD, your own full DD somehow.
That's correct. I think we'll probably discuss that as part of IO in terms of the learnings.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
yeah.
All right, yeah, because even the JSC actually, when they were here, they mentioned that they were not, you know, those risk sections in PLSs. I mean, you go to the US. I mean, the risk sections are the biggest in the PLS, you know, and the JSC said they were looking at that, you know. Would that help? I mean,
It will help because I think the disclosure is more important. I think the JSC was clear to say the PLS or even the prospectus, it's supposed to be a document of good quality with full disclosure of material things that can happen to the company that will have a material impact on the investor or investor's investment in the company. You know, so if you are compelled to produce a risk statement that is comprehensive enough and coupled with disclosure of accurate information, that should help the investor to make a much more informed decision. But if those things are absent, then there's a serious problem for an investor. And also players on the JSC will start questioning whether it's a safe place, you know, which, as I said, it's been the best in terms of quality. It's just that there has been those who are able to, you know, massage their numbers, you know.
Yes, I was worried because I was on one of the listing committees of the JSC. So this like worries me that how could things go through without checking them? You know. So it's a worry. It's
No,
quite a worry.
Commissioner, I've always trusted you there.
It's a worry. It's a worry. Yeah, I think I'm done. Yeah,
Oliver, is there something that you want to say?
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Just briefly. Dr. Machila, you were referred to this contract with SAC Oil as technical advisor that you signed. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you were referred to SAC Oil's duties in terms of that contract, the scope of work set out in paragraph 1.1.
Yes, Commissioner.
As well as the other paragraphs. Now, you were also then asked about the fees which were payable for the work, and it was suggested to you that there might be a situation where a double fee is paid, where the technical advisor, SAC Oil, is getting paid in respect of the monthly retainers that it is entitled to in terms of the agreement, but it is not actually rendering the work which is in fact rendered by another party for which the PIC would also have to pay. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You were asked whether there would be a double payment in that respect. And the stated aim of the questioning was that the line of questioning was to protect, was to make sure that the PIC was being protected. Do you remember that?
I remember.
Now, can I just refer you to the first paragraph dealing with fees of this agreement, in paragraph 4. And can I just ask you to read that for us, please?
Number 4, fees. In accordance with the terms and conditions of the agreement entered into between PIC and Aran pertaining to the financial support to be provided by the PIC to Aran, Aran shall be liable to pay any and all ancillary costs and expenses reasonably incurred by PIC, including the fees payable pursuant to this clause number 4, for which such payment shall be made on a quarterly basis.
So, in fact, it appears that the PIC wasn't paying the fees, Aran would be paying the fees, or was responsible for payment of the fees.
That's correct.
And read the second clause, please.
Accordingly, in respect of the services to be provided by the TA in terms of this agreement, the PIC shall pay the TA on a quarterly basis such fees that the TA incurs during each quarterly period for the duration of this agreement in respect of the services, provided further that the PIC shall be entitled to the reimbursement of such fees in terms of this clause 4.
I just want you to stop there, please. Okay. So from the first paragraph, it appears that Aran is liable for the fees. From the second paragraph, it appears that the PIC is entitled to a full reimbursement of all the fees, including the fees in clause 4.
That's correct, Commissioner.
In your view, would that protect the PIC satisfactorily?
Absolutely.
Then it was suggested to you that the technical advisor might not do all the work itself, and that there would be separate costs incurred in respect of a third party that the technical advisor had engaged in order to do that work itself. And that in that sense there might be a double payment. So can I just refer you to the clause dealing with costs and expenses, number 5 on this page?
I'm there, Commissioner.
Right. Just read it for us, please.
Number 5, costs and expenses. The fees detailed in clause 4 do not include costs or disbursement made on behalf by the TA to third parties in connection with this agreement.
I just want you to stop there. So it was contemplated in terms of this agreement that that there might be costs and disbursements made to third parties in connection with this agreement.
Yes.
And those costs and disbursements were agreed to be separate to the monthly retainers that the TA would get in terms of clause 4 above.
Yes.
And ultimately, all of that was for the account of Aran, and the PIC would be entitled to reimbursement for all of those costs.
That's correct.
Was there any further protection in your view that the PIC needed in respect of this particular contract?
I think this was sufficient in my view.
No further questions, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, with your leave, I'm out of turn. But I think to conclude this, there's one important document that I must raise with Dr. Machila. It's an extract from the minutes of the board meeting held on 21st February 2014. In my package number 13, it's not going to help you, Dr. Machila.
I thought that
Perhaps it can assist the Commission. I think it's 12. But perhaps I can read it to you.
okay.
It's an extract from the minutes of the board meeting held on 21st Feb 2014. It's Mr. Madavu, Portfolio Manager, and Mr. Nasani, Legal, joined the meeting. Report on CAMAC. It is clear from this document that there were serious reservations from the PIC board regarding this investment. In 1.1.7, it is recorded, directors questioned PIC's view on family-owned businesses and the application thereof. Management explained that the key difference between Adcock Ingram transaction and the CAMAC transaction was the way in which the business was operated from a governance point of view. 1.1.8, the rationale behind CAMAC's willingness to sell at a discount and not command at a premium whilst everything was going well was questioned. It was explained that CAMAC was an EMP company and was in the process of raising funds to realize value. PIC as a long-term investor was their preferred investor. 1.1.9, it was stated that PIC could not repudiate the fact that this was a risky investment, especially because of the nature of the business. Then the sack oil example is mentioned, and it says PIC has also instituted clear conditions precedent as far as the flow of money was concerned to ensure that the money would be spent for the intended purpose. Management was, based on the size of the investment, requested to negotiate at least 2 board seats, which never happened, we know. And then important, after a lengthy discussion on the allegations made in the media, where the PIC was warned, as you will recall, not to invest in this entity, PIC's responses to the media and PIC's approach to investments, it was stressed that the board should rely on management's integrity. The board could not take over that responsibility. Management should, however, keep the board abreast of its activities on an ongoing basis. It would just seem that all the reservations that the board expressed at that meeting materialized later. Would you agree?
That's the nature of investments. You know, you can't know, you can have a feel, you can have a view, you know.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. We have no further questions.
I'm still trying to find this document that you're reading from. It's extract from the meeting of what date?
February 2014, Mr. Commissioner.
Feb 2014. Then it must be here. Right.
We undertake to have this properly arranged down and ready for the committee, and we'll have a proper copy also for my colleague and Dr. Machila during the lunch adjournment.
Just a question, another question, from me. The oil and gas sector is a huge sector on the continent, whether it's in Angola, Nigeria, I think Kenya now and others. And the PIC tried to make an attempt to get into the sector, but things haven't sort of worked out. What is the PIC doing about this? I mean, do they want to get back again, or is something that, the PIC's hands were bent and they will sort of scared away from this, because it's a big sector that, you know, one would think the PIC would want to get its hands around.
I think we tried. We have some scars, big scars for that matter. Sasol has got bigger scars when they are supposed to be experts in this field. You know, so I think my colleagues, when I left, were doing extensive research around this. You know, in the long term, do we really want to be players in this? Or is the world changing so fast that fossil fuel will be a thing of the past, and therefore, you know, managed exposure or reduction of exposure into other things that are more cleaner may be the best option in the long term? I think for GPF, in the long term, cleaner portfolio, it's a lot better than show fresh scars at a point in time. You know, it may be, you know, not such a great idea. I think there are other alternatives, you know, sources of energy at play here. I would say PIC probably stick to what you have for now, or what you've lost, and move on and do other things that are going to be around 15 years, 20 years from now that will benefit the fund in the long term with a cleaner footprint.
Yes, because I was thinking about, you know, Tesla, you know, like electric cars and all that, that maybe the oil sector will suffer from that, but I was not sure.
Yeah, it will be around. I think the big players that are there will still be there, but small ones will probably find it very difficult because, you know, big funds are changing. They are becoming also aware of climate change, and they want to have a portfolio that also contributes towards, you know, stopping of emissions or building a cleaner portfolio in the long term is the way to go.
Thank you. Thanks.
Which of your clients would have been involved here, GPF or?
GPF mainly, GPF.
What was their attitude? I know that you had a mandate, or rather the PIC had a mandate to invest it. I think, what was it, 5% or something?
Yes. I think shortly after investing, they were concerned about newspaper articles that were coming out and criticizing the investment, and we engaged with them. And I think they were okay, but not necessarily happy with the investment. I think Mr. Stone was here, he just said it was a terrible investment. I agree with him. It was not a great investment. I think the timing was less than perfect. You know, when you get in at 100 and the oil price 3-4 months later is down to, it has halved and continuously falling in the manner. You know, there were lots of small guys other small companies that were taken out because of this. Lots of them, actually, that simply folded because of the low oil price.
Do we say that, I mean, is it right saying that the price, there was a time in 2014, it was like $140 per barrel, and then in 2017, it went to $30 around January 2017,
I remember
is that correct?
Around the time when we concluded the transaction and during the listing, it was trading at around 103, and it peaked at 106 and stayed there for a while. But once it started falling, it was like, it just fell down to 27.
27, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think by the end of 2015, it was trading at around 27 at the lowest.
yeah. That's it's a huge fall. Yeah. That's
Okay, shall we take the break now?
Can I ask one further question, Mr. Commissioner? I don't want to delay you, but I just want to ask Dr. Majila just to comment on one aspect. Dr. Majila, this is just another scenario where a spectacular fall in the price of something affects the investment, as happened with Steinhoff and as happened with other investments. Is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner.
And just at the time of taking these investments, I mean, should these spectacular falls in prices be foreseen and modeled in or not, or what?
I think, Commissioner, most of the time when we do sensitivity analysis, we will depend on history. Historical information say, this is the probability of falling by 25%, 20%, and so on, and do scenario analysis based on that. And never think about a 2 sigma event where you say, what is the extreme case, and therefore there's no business, and what is the probability of that happening? If you can see the sensitivity that there's no way that the company will survive, the question is going to be, what is the probability? And you say, but this is once in a while, in a blue moon, and then therefore it may not happen, and you pray that it doesn't happen. And when it happens, you have a big problem in your hands. But again, in the context of a well-diversified portfolio, you still have a cushion as long as you don't put all your eggs in one basket, as they say. Yeah. The same with SNS refinery. We were in there, we thought we've got the best, the medical just more than halved, and we couldn't get the oil, the feedstock at the right price, and cash flows in the company, and then it was history.
Just a quick one. Do you think that if oil price stayed at $100 per barrel, could have saved the company? I mean, it looks like it had different problems versus the oil price. Do you think it could have helped? It could have helped, but do you think it could have saved the company?
I believe it could have helped if it stayed at 100. That could have helped, because remember it managed to get to 10,000 barrels per day. Even at it survived at 2,000 for a long time. 2,000 barrels or so. So a higher oil price would have helped, but more fixing the technical problems as well and drilling new wells would have been at the, heart of getting it sustained over a long time. I think we can't run away from the fact that there were also technical deficiencies in the company that needed to be addressed. And when I was in the board of the company, I raised that quite vehemently to say they need to sort out their risk management processes, project management, which oil companies are about project management all the time. If you don't manage those properly, you'll be out of business in no time.
Yes, and if your rig is not working, then you can't produce, isn't it?
Then you have a problem.
You can have an oil price which is $1,000, but if your rig is not working, you can't produce.
Yes.
Yeah.
You must take the oil out of the ground.
Exactly.
Right, Dr. Machila, we're done with this one, Aran. And I think we'll be moving next to EcoBank?
Correct, Mr. Commissioner.
Yeah, but Dr. Machila, just remember that my colleague, Ms. Marcus, is not here, and there might be further questions tomorrow in respect of this one. Okay. What time shall we come back?
Shall we adjourn till 2:15?
2:15. We'll adjourn until 2:15.